Bob said if we don't, we're asking you to call.
That's nice.
We're in the opening statements.
Okay, he's unmuted also.
Yeah, I'm going to ask all day long.
I'm going to do the pledge tonight.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Get the mask off. Nothing.
Yeah.
All right, we're good. Ready? The regular meeting of the Mayor and Council of the Borough of Lavallette for Monday, October 19th, 2020 will come to order. Please call the roll.
Councilman Borowski,
Here.
Councilman Lamb,
Here.
Council President Salem,
Here.
Councilman Stockdale,
Here.
Councilman Cesar,
Here.
Councilman
Here. Thank you. Please read the Open Public Meetings Act statement.
Due to the coronavirus pandemic, this meeting has been closed to the public physically and is being live streamed via Zoom. Any comments from the public that are received via email no later than 4 p.m. by the municipal clerk will be read and discussed by mayor and council at the council meeting during public comment period. Notice of this remote meeting is posted on our website with instructions on how to public meeting for the live stream.
And this time I ask for a moment of silence. Thankfully, no local residents have passed away that I'm aware of. So during that moment of silence, I'll ask you to keep your personal thoughts in mind, after which I'm going to ask Councilman Lamb to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to welcome everyone to our meeting tonight. It's the first time that we're using the Zoom application to broadcast this, so I've been asked to read a little bit of the rules that we're going to abide by during these sessions for the foreseeable future. During the public comment parts of the meeting, if you'd like to speak, please click the raise hand button and we will be notified of your request to talk. I will recognize you and your microphone will be unmuted to allow you to speak. Once you have completed speaking, your mic will be re-muted. For security reasons, we cannot recognize anyone who is listed as anonymous or a phone number that is not identified. When you are recognized and unmuted, you must first state your name and address before saying any questions or comments. Failure to do so may result in you being muted and or disconnected. On computers, the raise hand button can be found in the webinar controls section, typically at the bottom of your screen. If you raise your hand by accident, feel free to lower hand and we'll unrecognize you. If you're only joining by dialing in, you can simply dial star 9, and toggle between raise hand and lower hand. That is star 9. On mobile devices, the raise hand and lower hand buttons are typically found in the lower left corner of the screen. The meeting will also be live streamed on YouTube. There is roughly a 20-second delay in the process. YouTube chat will no longer be used for public comment. It will only be using the Zoom application. I know that it's going to be a learning experience, just as it was when we first went to this digital format. So I expect that we're going to have a few problems here. We do get to see who is waiting queued up to talk, so it does help us here a bit. On to other news. Our dredging project is nearing, if not complete right now. There's a large dredge out there that is part of the state project, and they're hopefully going to finish up what we've not been able to get from land. The county has been over here for the last week and a half to 2 weeks. They've done a remarkable job. I inspected it this afternoon. Maybe we can get them in for a little bit more fine tuning on the south end, but the north end looks really, really good. You can't see the bottom, which is great news. So now, Jim, we need to get that jetty going so that we don't fill this thing back up. Okay. The county said that they would come back in June to do a little bit of fine tuning again for this. Mr. Price, do we have any idea how we're doing as far as cubic yards are concerned?
We're still good.
No issues?
No, we're in the lower 2000.
Okay, very good. So we've got plenty left for the state to take out. They will be using what they take out to cap that dredge hole that they're filling right now with sediment from other locations. We will be spreading the pile that you see down next to the memorial on the area between Philadelphia and McGee Avenues on that section of our bayfront there that's been beaten up pretty badly. So that's in front of that stone revetment that we had installed there. So hopefully we'll be able to rebuild that. Okay. Jim, you've got the discussion with Brian Beta on the public power matters.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. As you know, Mayor Lavallette is one of the 10 municipalities that participate in the Public Powers Association. I'm honored to represent Lavallette on that board. I currently serve as the vice president. I was 3 years ago, Jim Jablonski retired. He had come to several of our meetings, and when there's a issue that's, I think, worthy of the council to really hear it from Brian's perspective, that's why I've asked Brian to come and make this presentation. We had a meeting on Thursday with our quarterly meeting with the group, and there were some very interesting topics that were discussed. I'd like Brian to elaborate on those. Additionally, prior to the meeting, we had begun work on our budget for 2021 for our electric utility. And there was some phenomenons that occurred as a result of our 2020 experience that is going to affect the budget for 2021. Our usage in June was up 6%, July was up 6%. Every month in the summer was up 6 to 8%. September, we were up 12% compared to the year before. So I think that's reflective on exactly what we witnessed firsthand with the number of people that still stayed down. People, it's a secret no longer. They know how good it is. The unfortunate caveat to that is it's going to have an impact on our costs going forward. I spoke to the CFO. Is it something that we can, look at a little more closely? I'm not sure where we're going to take the discussion, but I think I just want to let people be aware of some of the facts. I've known Brian for 3 years. He brings a breadth of knowledge to this electric market that is more complex than you could ever imagine. One day he services this organization in so many different facets. One day you'll find him making sure that the orders for electric come in on the lines is current, and the next day he's in Trenton or in Valley Forge at PJM lobbying on behalf of the organization. So it's an honor to have the executive director of the Public Powers Association here. I asked, and he was going to come here, and Mr. Bryce suggested that he appear on Zoom. I also want to thank Matt Burke for jumping through a lot of hoops and hurdles to make this happen on such short notice, because it's our first time, and Matt embraced it, and I thank you personally. So if you could give Brian the screen.
Yes, thank you very much, Jim. I appreciate all the kind words. As Jim mentioned, I work for the PPA&J as the executive director. I've been here a little over 3 years now, and I've been working very closely with Jim for several years now. We're trying to tackle all of the complex energy issues that face not only Lavallette, but several other boroughs within New Jersey. And Jim does bring a great breadth of knowledge and value to our organization. So I do thank you for that, Jim. I'm going to attempt to share the screen now. And can everyone hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Thank you, Jim.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to attempt to share the screen. Oh, says host as disabled participant screen sharing.
I told you there were going to be problems.
Oh, there we are.
Oh. All right, good. You have the screen.
I have the
Brian.
screen. Okay, so you can see it now?
Yes.
Great. Okay, thank you. I will commence with the presentation. As Jim mentioned, one of the aspects
I think we lost your audio.
As soon as that's stood up.
that I talked about with him is the Borough of Lavallette. Let's see here.
Brian, I think you're going to need to start over again. Oops. Can you still hear us, Brian? It's not going well.
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, so I think you're going to start off again after your introduction. You're going to
Okay.
get
Sounds good. Thank you. As was mentioned before, Jim and I had been discussing the budget for Lavallette, particularly for 2021. And then I have some forward-looking statements for several years into the future. What I wanted to start off with is a little bit of background on what PJM is and several of the types of categories that are on your PJM wholesale bill. So PJM basically is more or less considered the electric grid. New Jersey is part of this grid. 13 states and Washington, D.C. Are part of this electric grid. And PJM basically controls and coordinates all of the movement of wholesale electricity on this grid. So within PJM, Lavallette's wholesale bill can be consolidated into four main categories: energy, transmission, capacity, and others. Energy is nothing more than the commodity that's consumed by the consumers. And we can either fix the commodity under long-term deals, which we have done for several years into the future, or you can float your electric commodity costs on the PJM spot market. And that's an hourly spot market, and it's somewhat volatile. So there's a little bit more risk in there than fixing your commodity costs. The next category is transmission. And transmission is really just the high voltage power lines that's used to get the energy from the generating unit to Lavallette's distribution system. And JCPL owns all of those transmission lines, and they get a FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, regulated rate of return for those for that equipment. The next category is capacity, and capacity really is more or less considered iron in the ground. It's all the types of generators that offer into PJM's market, into their capacity auction called the reliability pricing model. And really all it is PJM making sure that there's long-term grid reliability by making sure there are enough power supply resources to meet either predicted current or future demand. And then others, I won't spend a lot of time on that. That's just some of the other services that PJM utilizes to run their markets and support their grid. Now, in particular to Lavallette, what I did is I compared 2020 actual projected, which is I have the actual through September, and then I projected out October, November, and December of 2020 versus the estimated 2021 budget. And once again, getting back to those four main categories, we'll note that energy from 2020 through 2021, it is decreasing by 11%. And that is a function of, as I mentioned, you can fix your commodity costs, and we have fixed the commodity costs for Lavallette, and we are reaping the benefits of lower prices in the commodity. So there's about an 11% decrease year over year on the energy component. The next component is capacity. And capacity is based on basically your obligation. And your obligation is determined by Lavallette's 5 meter reads when the PJM system hits its peak. So whatever your meter reads are at those 5 times, that's what sets your obligation. And we'll note for 2021, your capacity costs are rising by 24%. And that's a big chunk of the overall increase in spending that Lavallette could anticipate in 2021. Next component is transmission, a little bit of an increase there. We see about an 11% increase year over year from 2020 through 2021. And then last but not least, others are pretty much remaining flat from year over year. One of the reasons that I mentioned capacity is one of the large components that are increasing. You'll note at the bottom chart, the capacity obligation is going up from 9.4 megawatts in 2020 to 10.5 megawatts in 2021. And that is a function of what Mr. Browski talked about at the beginning. There was higher usage in this past summer. So your past summer dictates what your future capacity obligation is going to be. So based on the notion that you had higher usage, you're going to have a higher obligation, which in turn is going to increase the costs in capacity by about 24%. Transmission is going to remain flat. Your obligation will remain flat year over year. However, the 11% increase is due to higher transmission revenue requirements from JCP&L, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. If we break down Lavallette's 2020 wholesale electric costs, we can see that 50% of your bill is based on transmission and capacity, and 41% of your bill is based on energy, the energy commodity. As I mentioned, that energy commodity is fixed and it's decreasing for the next several years. So that is fixed. The one area of concern, of course, is transmission and capacity, which makes up 50% of your bill. As I mentioned earlier, your obligation is based on your meter reads when PJM hits their 5 highest summer hours. And the transmission obligation is based on when Lavallette's meter read when JCP&L hits its 1 highest summer hour. The chart on the left is the JCP&L capacity price through PJM. You'll note it's somewhat erratic, but it's been within a range for the last several years. We see a slight uptick from this year to next year. And then the chart on the right shows the transmission price. You will note a pretty significant increase in the cost of transmission. We start off, going back all the way to 2017, all the way up to, 2020, the current one. We were at about 15,000 per megawatt year in 2017, and now in 2020 we're approaching, or 2021 we're approaching 40,000. So the point I want to make is 50% of your total energy cost is based on just 6 critical hours per year, and that's those 5 PJM peaks and the 1 JCP&L peak. So there is a lot of discussion I've had with Jim about the possibility of looking at some behind the meter generation, which can help control some of these costs, being that it's such a large component of your overall and total energy costs. As Jim mentioned earlier, I looked at your year over year change in usage, and you will note June, July, August, September had fairly significant increases in usage for Lavallette. Looking at that in comparison to the other towns that are members of PPA&J, for the most part across the board, there were decrease in usages. Lavallette was the only one that had an increase. So as mentioned earlier, higher average daily usage equates to higher peaks, which in turn increases your costs of transmission and capacity. And electricity usage is a function of temperatures in New Jersey. So although we did see June, July, August, and September have some higher temperatures year over year, some of that increase, the June, July, August, September increase in Lavallette's usage can be attributed to higher temperatures. But then also, I believe some could be attributed to, this is anecdotally, some part-time residents maybe staying full-time in Lavallette due to the ongoing pandemic. Looking at the commodity costs, as I mentioned, we have fixed your commodity costs with multiple wholesale suppliers for several years out into the future. You will note the year-over-year change in our costs. So 2021, we're going to see an 11% decrease. 22, we're going to see a 3% decrease from 21. In 23, we're going to see another 7% decrease. 24, another 7% decrease. And then 25, we're going to see an 11% increase. And that is just a function of what the futures market in the commodity is telling us. And, you will note we're going to get some pretty significant savings on the commodity over the next several years. Looking at Lavallette's transmission into the future, this is sourced from the First Energy Investors Conference on July 23rd, 2020. You will note JCP&L is looking at increasing the rate base of transmission by about $600 million in additional assets that they are proposing to build from 2021 through 2023. Currently, their rate base is $946 million. So you're going to increase that, $946 million up to roughly about $1.5 billion. Currently, there's a rate case going on at FERC, and it's being litigated in that docket, ER 20-2227. And JCPL is requesting a 10.8% rate of return. The PPA&J is actively involved in that case. But one of the things I just wanted to mention, to break it down into layman's terms, that's $600 million in additional plant that Jersey Central is proposing to build over the 20-year amortization period. That's going to amount in about $1 million in additional costs for Lavallette customers. That's $600 million, roughly, it's like 0.2% Lavallette is worth as far as obligation. So that equates to, roughly $1 million and $1.5 million additional dollars that Lavallette customers are going to have to spend. And technically, the transmission infrastructure they're building, to my knowledge, it does not benefit Lavallette customers whatsoever. The values are all across JCP&L's footprint, and then they're socialized to all customers on the grid. One of the things that is happening in New Jersey is offshore wind. Did I skip one? No, good. Offshore wind. And New Jersey has indicated that they want 7,500 megawatts of offshore wind by 2035. One of the first projects has been announced, and it has been awarded to Ørsted, or it's better known as Ocean Wind. So some of this transmission is going to be charged to Lavallette to all JCPL customers. We just don't know what the value is at this time. So that $600 million that I indicated in the last slide, it does not capture what the additional charges for the offshore wind transmission interconnection is going to accrue to Lavallette. So the way that the new Ocean Wind project is structured, the first 10 million is going to be eaten by Ocean Wind. Then from there to 130 million, Ocean Wind will incur 70%, and 30% will be recovered from ratepayers. Then from 130 million to 174 million, it will be split between the developer and ratepayers. And then after 174 million, ratepayers will pay 100% of the cost. Now, bear in mind, this is only one offshore wind project of 1,100 megawatts. There's about 7 more that are in the pipeline. So we have no idea where transmission costs are going to go based on all these projects, all these offshore wind projects. Right now, what's happening in the state is the state's basically running out of good areas to interconnect offshore wind. The state has recognized that. How are they going to accommodate 7,500? Because there's not a lot of optimal points onshore to interconnect. So what they're doing now is they're forming an alliance with New York, Delaware, Virginia, and Maryland to look at a regional approach. And what they're discussing is a backbone offshore wind project, which will stretch from Long Island Sound in New York down through Virginia. And once again, it remains to be seen how much of those costs will be borne by JCPL ratepayers, which we are. Lavallette is a JCPL ratepayer. Lavallette's capacity and this offshore wind potential. So as I mentioned, the state has a mandatory goal of 7,500 megawatts. Ørsted was awarded the project, which is going to be about 100 turbines, about 15 miles off the Atlantic City coast. Now, due to new federal rules, Ørsted is disallowed capacity revenues in the PJM market. And that's a big revenue component for all these developers. So the PPA&J has approached Ørsted, among others, on a potential bilateral capacity deal. We just started negotiations, and there could be some significant savings for PPA&J members on your capacity costs if we are able to close on a deal with Ørsted. But we're just in the early stages. This Ørsted project, the commercial operation date is slated for 2024. However, they have been running into a little bit of resistance. Some of the state legislators have issued a letter asking the BPU to halt it because of some misrepresented benefits that were promised, such as jobs. So it remains to be seen. It was supposed to come in line on 2023. Now it's pushed back to 2024. So we'll see where that goes. As I mentioned earlier, reduced costs for municipal utilities could mean lower costs for customers. One very big value proposition that is out there is managing your peaks to lower your energy costs. If you look at that middle little section there, it shows the peaks in orange. And as I mentioned, those peaks determine 50% of your total costs. And if we can find a way to reduce those peaks, there could be significant savings accrued to the borough. And one of the ways to do that is with behind the meter generation. So any questions on that?
Yes. What is the likelihood that PJM would see through these plans to reduce the peaks and find another way to assess the capacity charge after we spend, $1 million or more on a generator for producing power for us and reducing our peaks? If that were to occur in multiple locations, would they have a shortfall in revenue and then just find another way to increase our revenue elsewhere and negate all the savings that we've fought to gain?
No, so coincidentally, I mean, it's well within the rules to reduce peaks. There's a very big, very large business segment that does this. So what happens in PJM for capacity? It's where supply and demand intersect. That's what kind of sets the revenue requirements for capacity. And if you add behind the meter generation and you reduced your peak, there would just be less supply that would be needed to meet the demand because there would be less demand. And therefore, the market would still be whole. There would be no revenue shortfalls. And coincidentally, one of our members of the PPA&J, South River, they just installed, or actually they haven't installed, but they have started the construction process of a battery storage resource, which is 10 megawatts. They're about twice the size of Lavallette. They're roughly maybe a little more than twice the size. They're about 25 megawatts of peak, and they have just commenced construction on a 10 megawatt battery storage, which will in effect reduce their peaks by about 8 megawatts.
Additionally, Brian, isn't there a cap on this behind the meter generation that's been established? So I don't believe we're quite there. So there is the opportunity to still fill in that gap.
Yeah, there is a cap on the amount of behind the meter generation that can be built in the PJM footprint. However, several entities challenged PJM's calculation, and PJM did assert that their calculation was incorrect. So that cap actually, the cap stayed the same, but the amount that has been installed has been decreased, and there's a lot of room in there.
You talked about 5 PJM peaks and 1 JCP&L peak day. Does that peak day coincide with the PJM day, or is that a separate day?
Well, it could coincide, it could overlap, but that doesn't necessarily. As I mentioned, PJM covers 13 states. So in essence, it could be, 100 degrees in Chicago and 75 degrees in, New Jersey. And it could potentially be a peak on the PJM system, but not a peak in New Jersey in the JCPL territory. So they could coincide, but they don't necessarily have to. And I looked at that historically. It's probably they coincide 30% of the time.
Tell me about the footprint of the batteries versus the footprint of a generator.
Yeah. So the battery that South River is embarking on, it is 10 megawatts, as I mentioned, and it is the size of 2 flatbed tractor trailer backs. That is 10 megawatts. Now, depending on the size of the generator that you want, the footprint of let's call it a natural gas generator, depends on what technology. It's probably going to be significantly larger than that. And then, you need to get gas infrastructure in place to where that gas generator is going to hook up to your system. Our experience with South River, the battery storage, there's not a whole lot of infrastructure requirements that are needed.
And how about the cost of the batteries versus the cost of the generator? Our peak charge is between 9 and 10, so certainly we're not going to need 10. We're not going to knock our peak down to 0.
Right.
I would assume we're going to try to target 2 or 3, maybe more. I'm not sure what the proposal is here.
Yeah, the cost of a battery storage unit on a per megawatt basis is much higher than it is on a natural gas unit. There's some limitations with batteries, like the South River battery. It's only giving you 2 hours of basically generation. So I'll give the example, kind of what you mentioned before. What happens if, the PJM system peaks on the same day, and it's, at 5 o'clock, the PJM system peaks, and then at 6 o'clock, or actually at 7 o'clock, the New Jersey system peaks, and you already discharged the battery. You could potentially miss out on one of those revenue sources. Whereas a natural gas unit, they're considered baseload units. They can run all day if they had to, as long as you have the gas there. So there are limitations to both of the technologies. Natural gas is not looked at favorably in the state much more. I'll talk about that a little more in my next presentation. But yeah, the installed cost for a natural gas unit is much less than it is for a battery unit.
Hey, Brian,
Yes.
just a question. What's the life expectancy of the batteries?
So the battery, it's and I could speak from examples of like South River, and this is all public information. It's a 10-year term without any repowering of the battery. What I've heard anecdotally is batteries usually between 10 to 12 to 15 years, you have to repower them. And that's just basically just like your cell phone, once in a while the battery craps out and then you have to put a new battery in. Whereas a natural gas generator, the life expectancy is probably 25 to 30 years.
Any other questions?
Mayor, just to add, we're having the discussion, battery versus natural gas. The batteries are being used in a community that's serviced by PSE&G, not JCP&L. The transmission and capacity charges for those communities that are serviced by PSEC are much, much more onerous than they are in Lavallette. The economics for a battery supply, a company that does these batteries, it wouldn't work in our community.
Yeah, that is correct, Jim. Yes, it would be much more of a challenge to get a battery in place in a Jersey Central territory as opposed to a PSE&G territory.
Do we expect any savings in battery costs with the changes in technology? I agree about batteries evolving at a pretty substantial rate here with car technology. Would we anticipate decreased cost of the batteries or less environmental impact with the batteries down the road, year or two?
Yeah, in a year or two, I'm not sure how much, but yeah, we are seeing exponential increases in the efficiency of these batteries. As we witness on our electric vehicles, charging rates and all that stuff is increasing exponentially, and there's a lot of capital dedicated to this. So yeah, I mean, down the road, I'd like to see longer duration than 2 hours on a battery, and I think that'll happen as the technology evolves.
Okay, I'm done with my
The
questions.
the only thing really what the mayor was saying, I can't see how we've always looked at this peak, try to, we're gambling with 6 hours, the hottest day, and then cool everybody, and don't put your air conditioner on this day. I just seen that's so unfair that there's got to be some litigation. You said there was litigation at Con On, and it continues the same method, but to not have an average for yearly. I mean, when we figure out taxes on per diems, we do it on a yearly basis when we do real estate closings or anything else. I mean, everything's done on a per diem and on a yearly basis. To have this peak that everybody's chasing around for 6 hours, or you said 6 hours decides what our rate is. That I just think, I don't know if this is throughout the country, that everybody's basing it on this same thing, this a short amount of time in one day for 6 hours a year, or that the litigation is going to catch up and somebody's going to say this is patently unfair and should be brought back to something a yearly average. I would think so. I don't know that is that being looked at, or is there a litigation afoot?
Yeah, I don't know of any litigation per se. Most of the transmission owners in PJM use a similar methodology. Some, like PSE&G, uses 5 hours as opposed to JCPL's 1 hour. But that 5 hour method is basically utilized throughout the entire PJM footprint. I haven't heard of any litigation, and the 5 PJM peak is utilized throughout several other RTOs, regional transmission organizations, like up in New England and over in New York. They use similar methodologies.
Brian, how is your prediction model worked out?
Well, I don't use the prediction model. I mean, the one that we give basically what we anticipate a peak, but we're not really using it as a prediction model. But it, of course, has identified the peaks. But the entity that has contracted with South River, they are guaranteeing that they will hit the peaks as part of the contract.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Brian?
Yeah.
One other question. I know Seaside Heights has their generators down there.
Yes.
How much have they saved by having those generators?
So, funny little story about that. That's been there for several years, and they were doing very, very well. You know, they probably had savings. I don't know. Let's a couple $100,000, I would say. And then they ran into some issues with the permit, that it was not permitted properly. And I believe those generators have not been operating for the last 3 years now because of the permitting issue.
Any other questions, Council? Brian, take us on to the next phase.
Next one. I'm going to talk about distribution planning for the next 20 to 30 years and what we see happening in the state of New Jersey currently. So traditionally, your distribution system planning has been focused on maintaining safety, reliability at reasonable costs. Currently, the grid and the resource mix, which are the generators on the system, they're evolving, and distribution systems are changing, and distribution is planning. In fact, several of the state's IOUs, the JCPLs, the PSEGs, the Atlantic Electrics, they're ramping up their planning in preparation for the following. Electric vehicles, which we hear everywhere, vehicle to grid applications, energy efficiency and smart meters, and distributed energy resources. Talk about electric vehicles first. In the BPU's Energy Master Plan, they estimate that electric usage in New Jersey could double by 2050, largely due to electrification of the transportation sector. In states such as California, lawmakers have banned, yes, you've read that correctly, they have banned all gasoline vehicles by 2035 and mandated that all vehicles in the state must be electric by 2035. Now, the Murphy administration has not mandated electric vehicles, but they do have a goal of 330,000 by 2025 and 2 million by 2035. New Jersey currently has about 3 million registered passenger vehicles, or roughly about an average of one per vehicle household, and that's just passenger vehicles. There's a lot of other vehicles floating around. That's just passenger vehicles. Currently, New Jersey's offering consumer incentives for EV purchases. They're actually offering like 5,000 per vehicle, as well as they're offering incentives on charging station infrastructure. They want to build out an EV ecosystem. Currently, the BPU is requiring the IOUs, the utilities, to be responsible for wiring a backbone infrastructure of make-ready charging stations. They want 400 DC fast chargers available for public use and no fewer than 200 charging locations within the state. Talking about electric vehicles and the electric usage. So the average electric vehicle requires about 30 kilowatt hours to travel 100 miles. And there's varying batteries out there. This is just kind of an average. And that 30 kilowatt hour is about the same amount of electricity the average American home uses in a day. Now, the home uses the 30 kilowatt hours in a 24-hour period, where an EV basically would use 30 kilowatt hours when they would charge in a 4 to 6 hour period. The usage is concentrated. Most electric vehicles today have a range of 200 to 350 miles, but that is getting better by the day on a complete charge. So that equates to about 65 to 85 kilowatt hours per vehicle for a full state of charge. Most batteries today are about 60 kilowatt hours of capacity or capability. And they take around 6 to 8 hours to fully charge. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of different technologies out there. Tesla has better technologies. So things are evolving, by the day. I used one of our towns, Butler, as an example. They have about 9,000 housing units that they serve. If we use the average of one car per household, that would equate to about 9,000 potential electric vehicles in Butler's territory. Now, if each electric vehicle travels on average 100 miles per day, and we know that's probably not true, not many vehicles travel 100 miles per day, and we know from above it takes 30 kilowatt hours to charge, that equates to about 270,000 additional kilowatt hours of electric usage per day just from electric vehicles. Currently, Butler's entire system, all those 9,000 housing units plus all the commercial and industrial, they use on average 430,000 kilowatt hours per day. So what we're looking at is if electric vehicle penetration happens, it could potentially increase Butler's total daily usage by more than 60%. And once again, that's based on an assumption of everyone traveling 100 miles per day, which we know is not the case. Electric vehicles and your grid. So as we know, New Jersey consumers are not mandated to buy electric vehicles like they are in California. But if we start to ramp up electric vehicle usage, and if everyone's to plug in their vehicles at the same time, right when they get home at work, same time everybody's turning on their air conditioning, heating, stoves, televisions, etc., your distribution system could get quickly overloaded during peak hours. And that gets back to the mention of, your peak hours contribute to 50% of your total electric costs. So as an example, and this is basically just a rudimentary example, a level 2 battery charges between 3.5 and 10 kilowatts per hour. So let's take kind of a midpoint and assume 7 kilowatts per hour per vehicle per draw. So if we assumed on Butler's system that half of the cars were charging during the peak hour, that could increase Butler's peak load from 50 megawatts as it is currently up to 32 megawatts. There could be an additional 32 megawatts of additional peak load on Butler's system if all these vehicles were charging at the same time. Now, I know there's a lot of what ifs, what if they're not mandated? What if they don't take off as they are intended to do. I do think we're going to see a pretty significant ramp up of electric vehicles in the state of New Jersey. So one of the things we need to think about is our distribution systems, and we need to plan for the future. As I mentioned at the onset, looking at the next 20 to 30 years, what's going to happen. Can your circuits and substations and feeders and everything, can they handle the increased loads? Transformers handle the increased peak demands? Can your systems handle voltage fluctuations? These chargers usually charge at 240 volts, maintaining power quality. Can they handle multiple public usage charging stations? There's several things that you need to think about in your planning. And one of the things you may want to consider is surveying, residents and their EV purchases. So you kind of can anticipate when you're going to possibly see a ramp up of electric vehicles in your town. Several of these RTOs, these grids, they are now putting together vehicle to grid applications. They're putting together programs such as smart charging. So basically the system will tell you if it's plugged in, don't charge until it receives a signal from the grid, until, maybe it's not a peak hour, or maybe voltage is kind of fluctuating. So what's being developed are called bidirectional grid support. And several of these programs, like at PJM, they're monetizing these vehicle to grid applications in the wholesale electric market, where, you could plug your car in and potentially get revenue from PJM for maintaining frequency, maintaining regulation on the system. So just a thing to think about, an item to think about and consider. Do you want to develop a program? Do you want to consider new rate structures like time of use rates, maybe to dissuade electric vehicles from charging during peak hours, and whether your system can handle bidirectional grid support. But the IOUs are already looking at implementing some of these programs. So just something to think about.
Brian, a quick question before you move on there.
Sure.
You talked about the government mandating certain numbers of these charging stations. Will the governor decide that as members of the PPA that we're going to be forced to take a share of that? Or is that something that, not that I want to ignore it, but we could ignore the requirements and allow JCP and our customers to absorb most of that requirement?
Yeah, so basically JCPL is going to be required to basically put the wiring in, make it charger ready. And then there will be an individual entity, a third-party entity that will come in and put the charging station in. It still has to be worked out on, who's going to get charged for that. How is it going to go to the ratepayers? Is it going to be recovered by the developer? So that's being worked out. But as of now, it is no bearing on the PPA&J members. Some PPA&J members have embarked on voluntarily putting in charging stations. There is grant money out there that's available for electric vehicle charging stations, and some have undertaken that process, got the grants, which pretty much paid for almost 100% of the public chargers, and they are operational. Another item that's being talked about significantly in the state is energy efficiency. So all of the utilities have filed with the BPU to ramp up spending by hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars over the next 3 years to convince their customers to reduce their electric and gas use. There's a new state mandate that they actually have to invest in these energy efficiency programs. The IOU plans, or the utility plans, are providing direct grants, rebates, et cetera, aimed at lowering usage. And one of the reasons they're doing this is, I believe they see the electric vehicle usage demand increasing, and they're looking at this to offset some of that usage. So currently, the BPU approved PSE&G's plan to spend $970 million on 10 energy efficiency programs. They did want $2.5 billion, but they settled on $970 million. Atlantic City Electric filed for $100 million in energy efficiencies, and JCPL has plans to spend $300 million on energy efficiency. As an example, in the Atlantic Electric City, that $100 million program one of the things they're going to be doing is, they're going to be giving no-cost energy assessments, an array of incentives for energy efficiency upgrades, rebates on energy efficient appliances. They're going to provide a weatherization program that will give up to $7,500 per home energy retrofits, all at no costs to households, mostly with moderate incomes. And one of the drawbacks for us is at this point, we really don't have a lot of options to participate. Our customers don't have a lot of options to participate in these programs. We are eligible for some limited grants that are made possible through the federal government. The Energy Star, Home Performance with Energy Star, the Warm Advantage, and Cool Advantage. They're not very lucrative, but they are the only options available to the municipal and cooperative customers at this point. Next topic is smart meters and AMI. With the state moving, they're actually moving to 100% clean energy. The BPU lifted a 2-year moratorium on the IOUs moving to smart meters. So all 4 of the utilities have either plans to install smart meters, or in the case of Rockland Electric, they already have done so. And what they're looking at for these smart meters is they can be used to facilitate, as I mentioned, those vehicle to grid applications, as well as energy efficiency and demand response programs. As I mentioned, Rockland's customers already put in smart meters. Rockland put in smart meters last year under a pilot program. JCPL is spending $418 million. PSE&G is spending $714 million. And Atlantic City Electric, is spending $220 million on their enhanced smart energy network. And the last topic I want to talk about, I discussed it earlier, distributed energy resources. It's also known as microgrid. It's synonymous with behind the meter generation. These are all things, as I mentioned, all of these topics I've discussed. The utilities are ramping up either spending or programs for all of these things. Through the Energy Master Plan, New Jersey has given the IOUs the responsibility to integrate DERs through interconnection reform. They're making it much easier to interconnect a behind the meter generator on the IOUs than they ever had in the past. The state's testing models called town center microgrids. They're looking at value-based compensation mechanisms for all of these DERs. And the state wants to encourage private investment in DERs. So they're actually requiring the IOUs to file new integrated distribution plans, which will provide areas on the grid where these projects could be supported. So as I mentioned before, these DERs can help reduce your peak demands. They're synonymous behind the meter generation. They can provide reliability or resiliency to aid in recovery in the case of a disruptive event like a storm. They can provide flexibility to the grid and get compensated for it, such as frequency response and voltage support. So there's many benefits to a distributed energy resource. FERC weighed in on distributed generation just several weeks ago. FERC came out and said that there are barriers to entry for participation of DERs in the wholesale markets, and they reduced those barriers. Now, one of the things that they did in the rule is they gave ARERA, which is a municipal and cooperative utility, the ability to determine if a DER that is located on their system may participate in the PJM wholesale markets. So in the case of Lavallette or any municipal utility that distributes less than 4 million megawatt hours, you can opt out of allowing anyone to participate on your system. You have to affirmatively permit it, which is an opt-in for anyone who wants to put a DER in the system. DERs, once again, as I mentioned, or I may not have mentioned, in 2019, natural gas and nuclear power together accounted for 94% of New Jersey's electricity generation. 60% of that was natural gas, 40% of it was nuclear. 75% of New Jersey households rely on natural gas as their primary heating fuel. And part of the talk that's going on with this electrification is New Jersey. The governor also wants to convert home heating to electric or geothermal. So they want to have all the natural gas home heating convert over to either electric or natural or geothermal, which will also increase electric usage. In California, since they seem to be the leader in a lot of this, several municipalities have passed ordinances banning the use of natural gas in new construction, and several towns in Massachusetts are also considering similar ordinances. So what we see, a phenomenon we see in both New Jersey and in PJM, natural gas is slowly being phased out of the generation stack and is being replaced with offshore wind, solar, additional PJM wind. That's expected to pick up the slack over the next 20 to 30 years. As I mentioned earlier, the New Jersey BPU stated that they expect usage to double between 2020 and 2050 due to the electrification of autos and homes. So in 2050, natural gas is expected to produce near 0%, and nuclear power still about 15%. So total 15% down from a combined 94% in 2020, with solar and wind expected to pick up the slack, and they'll be producing the anticipated 85% by 2050. So if you look at the chart over on the left, we start at 2020, we see fossil gas and nuclear make up 94% of the generation, with the expectation of electrifying both the auto sector and the home building sector. We expect electric usage to go up. That is the black line. So it's expected to double by 2050. And as you'll note, fossil gas is anticipated to go down. Nuclear is about to stay the same. And we're going to fill in the gap with solar, offshore wind, and PJM wind. Now I bracketed the wind and solar for a reason where it says intermittent, because unlike a natural gas or a nuclear generator that are baseload units and they produce around the clock, wind and solar only produces when the wind is blowing or the sun is shining. So intermittency, could become an issue. So that's, another reason maybe do we want to consider a DER, a distributed energy resource, or a behind the meter generator. As I mentioned earlier, municipal and cooperatives owned DERs can help to reduce peak demands, which can in turn reduce your transmission and capacity costs, because we really do need to plan for electric vehicles' potential peak impact. DERs can provide resiliency to aid in recovery during storms or any intermittency of PJM generation. There could be increased system power loss and voltage fluctuations, which DERs can help control. And DERs can also offset some of the potential additional wholesale power procurement we may need to do if we see EVs really taking a foot in New Jersey and your usage going up. We'll have to in turn probably buy some more wholesale power. As Jim mentioned earlier, if you look at this chart in the PSE&G zone, you'll note by the gray line, that is why DERs are so financially feasible in the PSE&G territory as opposed to the JCPL or Atlantic Electric territory. Just looking at the transmission rate, we're at say 40,000 per megawatt year in JCPL. PSE&G in 2023 is moving up to 190,000. So the costs that the PSE&G customers are bearing it's just exorbitant. And then that chart on the right is capacity prices in all three zones. They're, as I mentioned, relatively within a range, nothing too frightening as we see to the chart on the left in the transmission. So in summary, we could potentially see significant daily peak load growth due to the electrification of building and transportation sectors, which could potentially destabilize a lot of distribution systems. So we need to consider planning and also looking at power procurement. We need to think about if we want to deploy or develop any vehicle to the grid incentive applications that are being developed by the utilities in New Jersey as well as the other RTOs. The energy efficiency programs, they're being ramped up with direct customer grants, but unfortunately our access to any types of grants are limited. Our customers' access is very limited to what federal grants are out there right now. Smart meters and AMI programs are being ramped up across the state to allow for vehicle to grid applications, as well as demand response participation. Most of our towns, many of them have already installed smart meters, but it may be time to look at, revisit those and determine, what else can be done. And then last but not least, the case for DERs. There, as you know, there could be significant cost savings with peak reductions. It could correct any destabilization that we see because of these increased peak loads. And we could see some instability on the entire system due to the new generation mix, due to the intermittency of wind and solar. And we do see battery storage gaining ground as a behind the meter generator as the costs continue to decrease. So any questions?
I just want everyone to be aware, there's a lot of activity going on. There's a lot of changes in the electric marketplace. It's incumbent upon us to be aware of these changes. And the Public Powers Association, Lavallette is one of the smallest of the communities. So we are fortunate that we can do things that other towns can't, but there's a lot of things that we will definitely follow the larger communities. This notion of vehicle to grid at our meeting, one gentleman brought up the fact that, listen, I'm going to spend $70,000 for a Tesla, and then I'm going to, through some sort of tinkering with the system, enable my battery from my car to discharge into your grid to save a few extra dollars on my electric bill. I'm not sure there's going to be a big incentive for that initiative. And this thing is evolving and it's changing daily. So the smart meters, believe it or not, those radio read meters that we have are that's a feature of that. And we're just using it for building purposes, right? I mean, to read them remotely, but there are with some additional upgrades. There's some features to that we could definitely, manage the distribution of the usage.
I think as a smaller community, we can also coattail off of the larger ones as they experiment with different things and find which ones work the best or which ones are the most economically feasible, rather than us being the leader.
The one aspect though, Mary, I've been advocating it for many, many years, that behind the meter generation, we had a proposal announced where, it's zero exposure for Lavallette. This investors wanted to come in and set this up with a guaranteed rate of return. It's just a question of siting in the model.
Absolutely.
It's always been the case. But I wanted to thank Brian for giving us this opportunity to hear all these developments in the market. And I really wanted to say a special thanks to Matt Burke for being able to put this all together for us so that everyone, I hope, got some benefit from it.
Brian, I'd like to thank you as well for giving us a lot to think about here, as if we didn't have enough already. And we certainly will be thinking about the different options. I'm sure Jim has been presenting them to us, and I'm sure he's going to continue to do that. We've considered for many years this generator behind the meter, and we've just not been able to site it anywhere. Jim and I have gone out on 2 separate occasions now to view. One was a diesel, one was natural gas fired. The natural gas, sound-wise, was acceptable as far as I'm concerned, but again, the size of the unit, we can't locate it at this point, so we've got to discuss options there. Dave, guys?
Maybe it's time we start encouraging people when they do their houses to put solar panels on them. That was it.
Solar panels, we should.
Solar panels.
Joanne?
I have a question that's related, but sort of a backdoor. If we are the only community that showed an increase during June, July, August, and September, is it possible that we can appeal to the COVID funding using that data as proof that our community took an extra burden as people came here to escape COVID in other areas? I mean, we're the only ones that went up. Everybody else went
Well,
down.
total consumption went up, but we billed for that. So these people didn't pay it at home because they weren't at home. They paid it here. So there's really no impact to the borough itself.
Well, doesn't it have an impact to the ratepayers since
On the capacity transfer.
It might.
I think we should at least look into it, that maybe we can recoup some of that in terms of the transmission costs or decrease it or do something. I mean, if we're the only community that showed that at all, there's got to be some evidence that our ratepayers or our community in some way bore the burden of
Well, I'm
that.
not sure that the September increase was any of the 5 peak days. You know, we had.
But it
peaks.
wasn't just September, it was June, July,
Well,
August,
we're
and
gonna-
September.
We're just seeing, I think, increased consumption because of the increased size of the houses that are being built here with, 3 and 4 zones of air conditioning. That's probably taking the biggest toll on consumption in town.
Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the 5 peak days all occurred in July.
Yeah, the 5 PJM peaks as well as the 1 JCPL peak all occurred in July.
So whether it's COVID or not, we're gonna have people here in the summertime and they're gonna have their air conditioners on. So I think the increase in July was not anything related to COVID. Whereas September clearly was because rather than going home, they stayed here, but that didn't affect our peak.
You might have to compare it to other Junes or other Julys or other Augusts, and try to do an analysis of the usage, because we were more crowded than usual. People stayed longer, stayed all week, stayed all day, I don't know. It's just, it's money, so why not look into it?
Yeah, one thing I would like to mention, I did look back at your wholesale usage, not what you bill to customers, but at your wholesale meter, and 2020 is on pace to be the highest in the last 10 years.
I would anticipate that. Anyway, Mr. Bryce?
I don't think there was any provision in the OC there to cover that, but I would think.
Take a look at it. Maybe there's something there. We'll investigate every avenue as usual.
I think the emphasis is on the only community, which has to mean something. It was hot everywhere. People escaped in a lot of places. So if we are the only, then we are different. I don't know why, but we are obviously different. But everybody along here is beach community.
Yeah, we didn't look at Bayard. We looked at Bayard.
Yeah, they're not part of the Public Power Association. Seaside, it's only, right?
I'm just looking to save some money.
Okay.
And I think you would see that their population decreased somewhat.
Yeah. Yes, it wasn't as busy down there as well. Any questions or comments, Anita? Mike? Bob? Brian, thank you again for your presentation. I'm sure we're going to be talking.
Great, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Brian, before you go, can you turn host control back to me?
Hello?
Hello?
This is Laura Deck. I have a question.
It's not public comment time.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay, no problem. We're all learning here. Okay, I'm going to move on with the agenda. Are we prepared to do that, Matt?
You should.
Okay. So next we have approval of minutes. We have the caucus regular meetings minutes of October 5th. There are no corrections, additions, or changes. I will ask for a motion on the minutes.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Borowski?
Yes.
Councilman Philpott?
Yes.
Council President Salem?
Yes.
Councilman Stockwell?
Yes.
Councilman Fincher?
Yes.
Councilman Lamb?
Yes. That motion is approved. Resolutions on the consent agenda, as usual, I will read by name, accepting council comments along the way. At the conclusion, I will ask for a motion and then a roll call. Number 235, authorizing refund of the zoning application fee in amount of $100 that was paid in duplicate. 236, refunding the unused balance of planning board escrow fees in the amount of $336. 237, authorizing the Lavallette School PPO to amend their previous approved raffle draw from October 18th to October 30th. 238, establishing a curfew during the Halloween season from October 29th through October 31st from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. for minors under the age of 18 years old unless accompanied by an adult over the age of 25. 239, approving 2 raffle licenses for Lavallette PTO to hold a 50-50 off-premises gift raffle on November 27th and a 50-50 off-premises draw raffle on December 18th. Number 240, certifying to the NJ Local Finance Board that all governing body members have reviewed at the minimum the sections of the annual audit entitled Comments and Recommendations, and there were no comments or recommendations, correct?
Correct.
So I'm sure that everybody read nothing. Very good. Okay, if there are no comments from council, I will accept the motion. Do I need to open this to public through Zoom? Nobody knows. Phil,
Phil? Mr. George?
Phil, what are we gonna do here? Do I have to open this to public comment now at this phase?
No, Your Honor, not on the consent agenda.
Okay, a roll call, please.
Councilman Borowski?
Yes.
Councilman Philpott?
Yes.
Council President Salem?
Yes.
Councilman Stockwell?
Yes.
Councilman Pinter?
Yes.
Councilman Lamb?
Yes.
That motion is approved. Resolutions off consent is number 241, the bills list, the amount of $3,550,120.16.
So moved. Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Borowski?
Yes.
Councilman Philpott?
Yes.
Council President Salem?
Yes.
Councilman Stockwell?
Yes.
Councilman Pinter?
Yes.
Councilman Lamb?
Yes.
And that motion is approved. That takes us to unfinished business. Dave, any unfinished business?
No, I have, just get out the vote. The census is over, so if you didn't send your census forms in, you have to wait till 23rd.
The voting is definitely unfinished business. Jim? When?
Good.
Mike?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Bob? Anita?
Yeah, Dave said, no unfinished business. We've been working very hard, Dave. We are one of the communities that is going to have a beach sweep. And we made up our own flyer, actually, because we wanted to put down, come and get a gift card from Dunkin' Donuts. You can't have breakfast with us because they can't have an open breakfast. But after you hand in your tally sheet, your
Turn on
data,
the microphone.
very important.
Turn on the microphone. There you go.
If you hand in the tally sheet, which is very important, we will be giving you a gift card, a $5 gift card from Dunkin' Donuts. And Dave has a lot of supplies left from previous years that he saved through the years, and he brought all that out. And we will have 2 huge tables. I told Public Works they're always good at this. To two big tables separate, so people are not going to be at the same table crowded. And we should have a good beach sweep. That's going to be on Saturday, October 24th, from 9 o'clock to 12:30, always in Philadelphia. So Dave's been working very hard at that. And he's going to be putting signs around town. And also the police, they do a great job with that sign on the highway. They real quick put up the food trucks, which was a very exciting event that I went to. I was so sorry that so many of the trucks had to cancel. And because they did cancel, LBA did not charge an entrance fee. So you came and you used the trucks and whatever. And it was very nice, but they put the sign on the highway. And then before I even got a chance, I came in to tell Mr. Bryce to have it changed, and it was already changed to the beach sweep. So thanks very much for all of that. It's going to be a good day for us. But I did have to tell them to social distance and wear a mask. And when they do come, they have to sign an affidavit. They're not going to hold any of us responsible if something happens. And they will sign that affidavit. And also we'll be giving community letters, community helper letters to the kids. So that was great. The food trucks were very nice. Thanks Public Works for all the work they did down there, getting the place set up and also keeping it clean during the day. Also, I want to once again thank on behalf of the children, everybody at the school. Our local business Friday is picking up bags of candy, Halloween candy for the kids. They're getting one for each child, and they also picked up 10 peanut free. So that those that are allergic to peanuts will not take any of that home. So they'll get their bag when they're going home from school on Friday. I don't know what people are doing, if LBA is doing anything. I know there's a lot of restrictions that he has to stop trick or treating or stop trick or treating, but I know there's a lot of restrictions on how we do it. So a lot of people don't want to do it because of the restrictions and the policy and how you have to do it. So a lot of people will not be doing trick or treating. I don't know, have any of you heard any more about that? If you, but they will be getting a nice big bag of candy. They're having Halloween parties in the school on Friday, and then that candy will be there for them to take home. So that should look nice. So Beach Week was good. The food trucks was fun. Also, I want to say thank you to you guys. Remember when we had our Memorial Day here? We took pictures. Bob Cummins took some beautiful pictures. I gave you some, and I had two that I wanted to give to the two families. If you can remember, we were all standing with our masks on, and there were two big tables set up. One table had Doug Hauser's picture, Adam Hauser's picture, and the other table had Sharpie Down's grandmother, who had been in the two wars that we added her name to the monument. So I sent the two last pictures I had, one to the Hauser family and one to Sharpie Down's family, and they were thrilled to death. So they said, please thank all of them for that. Couple of things that are kind of sad to have to say is our town is 133 years old. December 21st, we will be 133 years old, and we usually have a big happy birthday party down at the First Avenue of Heritage, which we had to. That's been canceled. So one of the fun things have been canceled this year. That's another one. And also there will be no New York City bus trips, and there will be no ski trips. So a lot of things have been canceled. I'm sorry to say, but it's these are things that have to be done for the safety of all. I want to thank Mr. Bryce. Any problem that comes to him, he managed to solve them very, very quickly. We have a person in town that's very sick, and she had bought a bench for her husband when he was very sick. And when he passed away, she made sure the bench was there. The bench got damaged, and I told Public Works, because Public Works comes right away. They saw if they could fix the bench. They really could not fix the bench. So she knows there's no bench there, and she's getting very older, and she wants that bench. So I called Bob, and Bob researched and researched. I called beautification, and they had no responsibility for the bench. After so many years, they lose responsibility. She had paid $1,000 for the bench. So Bob looked everything up, and he came up with a price and transportation and everything. She sent a check over that very day, and that bench will be there. It's pretty much like the ones we have at the beach, but it has to be some in concrete down there. So I want to thank him very much for that, all that work he did on that. A lot of times he does things that they never get noticed. They never get noticed, but that was wonderful. Okay, that's my.
All right, very good, Anita. Thank you. Then we're going to move on to new business. And I'll go right through the order again. Dave, you got new business? No. Jim? Michael? Bob, how about the well?
What?
The well.
The well.
That's new business.
The well is
Watertown.
number 3. Needs to be rehabilitated somewhat, but it's going to be looked at. We're going to try to, I think they need to pull it and to see whether the motor and see what I say. The motor and the casings. The motor could be just something simple. Maybe it could be cleaned, it could be serviced in some way, but you never know until you pull it. So that's what we're going to be looking for.
Yeah, so they did some testing. Mr. Bryce, you have some information on the well?
Well, number 3.
Well, number 3.
We're waiting on Schulte to give us the estimate on what's going to cost for the inspection. I just spoke to the engineer today. He's waiting for that. Once we get that, we'll be.
So we don't know how severe the problem is
No,
until.
not yet.
Okay.
Which number well is down here on Washington?
4.
That's the one we did last year. And that's in excellent condition. We got that in before the summer season was very important. Now we've got an issue with number 3, which is down in Newark Avenue. So we will need that by summer, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
How about the inspection of the water?
Water towers, what happened with that?
For
So
some
it's on.
Yeah,
Trust.
okay, go ahead, Bob. I know they had a company come down, they were looking at it, they, think there was a, painted drying time or something like that.
So far preliminarily, they didn't want us to really go too far out until they give us the report, but the two things it seemed like there was an issue with grinding possibly, when that was done in relation to when the coating was put on, and then another issue, with possibly a thickness of the paint, in certain spots, particularly where the weld pits are.
Yeah.
So, we're waiting on that report, and then that's gonna go right to the engineer, and the engineer will address that.
While we're on the water tower, I did get several calls from people in town wondering, why is it that you had to take the lowest bid and get, because that's the status of New Jersey public bidding law. Mr. George, can you explain to the public under what circumstances we could reject the lowest bidder?
Very limited circumstances, Mayor. One is that they could be rejected if they were found not to be qualified. For instance, if there were state certifications or licenses that they did not supply that happened to be required. Another reason would be for past performance, for instance, contract defaults. That's very, very unusual. And there's a catch-all which kind of depends on all of these factors, which is you consider them the lowest qualified bidder. So if my law firm bid on painting the water tower, we probably wouldn't be qualified because we don't have that expertise. And that's sometimes used where new companies come in which are branching out but don't have any track record. Those are the only reasons, though. The law does require you basically to accept the lowest qualified bid. So if that company was qualified, you had to accept them.
So when we receive bids on various projects, your firm reviews the bids and makes a determination as to whether they're qualified to make the bid, correct?
That's correct, Mayor. It's quite an extensive review. We have to go through all of the categories, check off all of the boxes in the bid specs that the engineer or whomever prepared and make sure that they're actually qualified.
So there have been instances where we really didn't want to use the lowest bidder, but state law requires that we do that. It's not like, and we'd love to save money, but
Some recent construction in the borough comes to mind, Mayor.
yes, in two instances, recent construction.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
precisely. And we're stuck with it. And we didn't have any bad information about the contractor who did the water tower. We took the lowest bid because we were required to do that. So it's not a reflection on the council accepting inferior work. And we do have an engineer who oversees it to make sure that it's done. And we also have a bond to protect the taxpayers here in the event that there's problems with the work, which is clearly what we have in this. Mr. Price?
Mayor, I got several inquiries too about the quality of the water. There's no issue with quality of the water. This is an exterior issue. It has nothing to do with the interior of the tank.
And the interior was inspected as part of this inspection process. The interior has absolutely no issue. You've got great water here, no
So
issue.
we can do daily tests.
That's the same thing with well 3 too, even, having an issue there. I think every 15 years or so, you should have it inspected just as we're doing it. This one hasn't been inspected. It might be going even over 15-year period, so.
Okay. Okay, any other new business? Mr. Price, you got any new business?
Under old, I didn't get this in far.
We'll let you pop back there.
I just want to touch on our outdoor dining. We did approve that outdoor dining through November 30th. However, the state just came out, any alcohol beverage establishment, they're going to give them the opportunity to stay open through the end of March and serve outside in March. With a $10.
Gee, thanks.
$10
I'm sure our restaurants are thrilled with that.
So maybe next month we'll look into the non-liquor establishments.
If the beer go into the brand.
Thank you. Okay. Then that is going to take us to comments from the public for the first time under the new Zoom criteria.
Maybe you want to read these ones that came in.
Sure.
Through the court.
Sure,
They're all.
I have a few of them here. You want me to read these? I can do
I'll
that.
read it.
I will do that. Kathy Grandstrand. As you know, for the past 7 summers, I have coordinated the weekend pickleball program here in Lavallette. Many people come to play and have a wonderful time and make new friendships in the process. Unfortunately, the condition of the courts has been deteriorating rapidly. The courts are cracked with grass growing and the painted surface is slippery and dangerous. I know that repairs have been in the budget for the last 2 years and players are constantly asking me when we can anticipate resurface courts. I'm concerned that the longer repairs are not completed, the more costly the job will be. When can we anticipate repairs to be made? You are correct that the capital budget has contained a notation for repairs to those courts, but in the borough of Lavallette, the capital budget is kind of our wish list. If we have the funds after the emergency situations, then we typically will take care of some of those capital improvements. We just got another notification about this well. We don't know what this well is going to cost. So the budget season's coming up quickly. And if the picture looks rosy, then we'll again consider repairs. We have been investigating different techniques. We looked at various forms of renovation, including resurfacing. So it's not like we are not considering repairs, but these things take a long time. The wheels of government here in Lavallette turn pretty slowly. We don't just spend money because people ask us to spend money. Our taxes are the lowest around because we're thoughtful and careful when we spend our money. We're going to continue to investigate this, and if we have the funds, we will certainly do some repairs, but it's going to be in next year's budget, not this year's.
And hopefully, because Mayor, I've been down there, there's a load of people play down there. And I just hope nobody falls, because I'd rather spend the money fixing the courts than worrying about.
Well, we have insurance for that, Anita. And my question has always been, how many of those loads of people down there are actually taxpayers of the borough of Lavallette? You know, if there's 10 out of 100 and they want the borough of Lavallette to fund the repairs, I don't think that's fair to the taxpayers in the borough of Lavallette. So we need to analyze the situation carefully before we decide to spend. We know they need some work. It is on the wish list, and when we have the opportunity, we will certainly get those repairs done.
I can tell you actively,
Touch your button, it's taking a minute.
we've actively looked for services. I know Mr. Bryce and myself and Kenny Galabowski, the superintendent of public works, have looked at various services. We've sent people from Medford to, I think there's somebody up in Monmouth County who looked at that service, and a lot of them, they look promising. And then we started looking some that had a few years into them, and they were in bad shape. So we don't want to go and spend ourselves $50,000 and then come up short of something that's inferior. So again,
Mrs. Rancher has to help us with that. Check out some.
yes, she has. She really has. So
Mayor,
and
aren't
she
the
didn't like
old,
some of the services that we provided.
aren't the old basketball courts on that list as well? To fix and surface, so.
We've been having discussions.
I mean,
We've been having discussions about
we have some
those as well.
recreation things down there that
Yes.
all need attention, so,
That's huge.
I think we've been doing a pretty good job on repairing our infrastructure here in the last couple of years. We've spent a lot of money on a lot of different projects, none of it wasted. And I think we're going to continue to do that, and it will find its place, hopefully this year.
Do something. This COVID kind of stopped a lot of things.
So I had a similar question from Ed Stark. Ed, I hope that answers your question. Jenny Marino, same question. And Jen Nichols, same question. When is the money going to be spent on pickleball? We can't say for sure, but it's on the agenda. It's on our radar.
Right.
If
Okay.
I'm not mistaken, I think that the tennis courts that we have designated for tennis courts probably need rehabilitation
Before the pickleball. Okay. Priorities. Okay, that's all the comments I have here in writing. Are there
I do have a hand up with Patrick Grandstand, put it down. I'm going to use more deck to comment the facility.
Yes, I have a question on the solar energy. I've been trying to get solar. And most of the solar companies say they don't deal with Lavallette Electric.
Mr. Price, any,
There's multiple
Locations.
multiples.
there are 8 installations in town, so maybe Matt could let you know the companies that have agreed to work with the Lavallette Electric Department. That's probably what it is. I'm sure Matt can hook you up with some of the companies that currently have installations here.
Okay, so then I'll just get in touch with him via email. Okay, great. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, then we will close the public portion. Move on to council comments, Dave.
Nothing, just vote.
Jim? Joanne?
I'm good.
Michael?
Fine, thank you.
Bob? Good. Anita?
I just want to remind everybody to come to our beach suite and to have a good, safe Halloween, whatever you do. And let me know also that, we had a fellow in town, Brian Basso, that wrote a book about first about the North Lavallette, when they joined Lavallette and West Point Island. He's writing another book. He's not telling you the title right now. He's writing another book. He is also been very active in the county, and he's now the president of the Ocean County Historical Society. And he stopped at my house the other day because they are celebrating the suffragette movement in this country. And they're having a big celebration Thursday at the Historical Society building. And they have a whole display and then outside dinner and music. So I'm going to be representing the Carl.
Very good, Anita. Thank you. We appreciate you doing that kind of work for us. Mr. Bryce?
I'm good, sir.
No comments. I am good as well. A little bit long meeting for current times, but that's all right. We got a lot of information. A lot to think about with the power.
Thank you for allowing Brian to present there.
No problem.
Appreciate it. Once again, thanks, Matt. for everything
Thank you, Matt.
To make this work.
And thank you, Craig, for coming in.
Behind the scenes technical.
All right, then I need a motion to adjourn. So moved. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Good night, Bill.
Thanks, Phil.